Welcome to Scaretales. Today's stories are about angel interventions. Caller Anonymous. My husband and I and our 3-year-old daughter were coming home from visiting family on a road outside of Chicago, Illinois. It was Harlem and Route 30 back then. We were at a stoplight heading north on Harlem, and we were waiting to go, and the light turned green, and my husband stepped on the gas. We were moving forward. Then out of nowhere, just to the left of us, this car went through the red light. I was looking at the car and I knew we were going to be hit. He was that close. I could see his face through the windshield, and I could see that he didn't have any passengers through our car door where my husband was sitting. You could just see it. We were going to be hit. I turned because my daughter was very precious. And I turned and I said, "Oh God, please, don't let her get hurt." I turned back and everything got very watery. It was like I was looking through water, and the car went through us. I could see the interior. I could see him. I felt our front end kind of lift from the force of the impending collision. So the next thing I know, I'm looking at his license plate through the window on the passenger side. And he's still speeding. He didn't hit his brake until after, I guess, what you'd say he hit us, or he should have hit us. In other words, he braked after he passed through us. He didn't have any reaction to it. He hit the brakes and he stopped somewhere down the road, and people came running up to us, other cars. They were screaming, "We saw you get hit! We saw you get hit!" And my husband and I were totally freaked out. We were just so stunned. And people ran up to us and they were looking and they realized that we weren't damaged. We weren't hit. They realized something was wrong. We weren't smeared all over the road, which we probably should have been. So not only did I see this happen, but there were witnesses who saw what should have happened. I can remember 2 things very distinctly. One was this man that came up to us and he was howling, "I saw it hit you." And then he got a stunned look on his face, like he realized. And he's just like, "How? Why?" He stood back and other people stood back. I think that collectively we realized that something very strange happened. The guy down the road, the one who should have hit us or did hit us, looked stunned, then got in his car and drove off. It's been 30 years and I haven't thought of it a lot. In fact, only in the last 2 years, I've heard stories like mine twice, and I was stunned and so surprised that other people had it happen to them also. I sometimes feel like it was an intervention of some sort. I'm really not comfortable with saying it was a miracle, because I'm not that terribly religious, but I don't know. I've had that watery seeing look before, so I know that it's something that happens to me once in a while. All I can tell you is that we should have died. We didn't. There were people who saw it, because we'd stopped literally in the middle of the intersection. We pulled over, and we were both just sitting there. There are other stories like this from people that instead of a vehicle hitting them, it passes through them, like it wasn't the right time. This story was given to me by Sherry from Prince George, British Columbia. I was driving in downtown Prince George with my son, who was 9 at the time. We were laughing and singing along with the music and having fun. I went through a yellow light, and at the last moment, I saw that a lady in another car was about to crash into us. Right then, time seemed to slow right down. I could see her clearly. I could see inside her car. I could see the interior of her car. She was the only passenger, but there were 2 faces peering from the back seat into the front of the cab of her car. The collision was going to happen on the side my son was sitting on. From the speed she was going, it would have crushed his side and went into my side, probably killing him and seriously injuring me. I remember looking at the being and saying, "Not my son. I'll do anything." They said, "Anything?" I said, "Yes." They told me it would be painful. I told them I didn't care and again said, "Let him live." This happened in the space of seconds, milliseconds. I vividly saw the woman whose car should have went through us. She should have stopped halfway through my body, but instead we passed through, and I was left looking back at her in the middle of the intersection with her mouth open in shock. I could see her vividly in the rearview mirror. It would turn out that the next few years were some of the most difficult of my life, which were followed by some of the best. I don't know what I saw that day, if they were angels or what they were. I don't think that my difficult times were punishment from the beings. It was more a glimpse into my future, things that were predestined to happen, and my son was meant to be part of them. Daniel in Reedley, California, said he had an experience like the caller from Englewood, California. When I was 7, I was walking along a canal, and as I threw a rock in, I fell in. I was drowning, but then I was lifted out, and nobody was there. The caller is from Englewood, California. There is a street called Hyde Park Boulevard that goes between Sinella Boulevard and Marlboro. It's a pretty heavily traveled area. There's a place right just as soon as you start going eastbound where it goes down and then comes back up. Well, there was a youngish black couple that was standing leaning against the fender of a car, like maybe a late 60s or early 70s car, and they were standing in the street facing toward the middle of the road. They were side by side talking, and between them and me was another car, and this guy was driving crazy. I don't know if he was drunk or what, but it almost seemed to me as if he was aiming for them. This happened maybe 150 feet away ahead of me, and it's like he was aiming at their legs. I was seeing this happen, and you know it's going to be horrible if it happens. I didn't want to see this. It was the darndest thing I ever saw. These two people, in one motion, without flexing their knees, without showing any effort whatsoever, went straight up and back, and they were standing on the fender of that car. Now, if they knew, if they had some participation in this miraculous escape, they would have been sprawled out over the hood, or you would have seen them jumping with different motions. But it's as if something was standing above them and picked them straight up, and then they were standing without having moved a muscle on the fender of that car, and the car swept on past. It didn't hit the car they were on. They were lifted up vertically. The car would have hit them had they remained where they were. They would have definitely been left with stumps if they were even alive. It was going to be a horrible thing. The car veered toward them and paralleled the car that they ended up on top of, that they were standing in front of. It probably missed by inches and then continued down the road. And these two just looked at each other and they were just stunned, and they just started laughing like they couldn't believe it. I didn't stop. I kept going, but should have stopped, and I should have said, "What was that?" But it was just an amazing thing to see. And after I really began to think that maybe there really are angels, because there's no way possible, even with good reflexes, that they could have done that.